Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules YouTube channel. This is our 2024 review season. 10 teams have officially been knocked out of the race for the 2024 Premiership Cup. We're going to work our way through them, starting from the bottom. And then as each team gets knocked out, we'll continue on with each team. So first up, our Wooden Spooners, Richmond Tigers. They had a rough season. We lead with them. As always, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Let me know what you thought of Richmond's season. Let me know what you think of all the points I bring up here. Am I right? Am I wrong? Let me know. Also, don't forget to check out all the social medias. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of them. And also, don't forget, 2 podcasts every week going live on YouTube, this channel, and Spotify at All Aussie Rules on everything. Without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. The Richmond Tigers, as we said, Wooden Spooners, finished 2 wins, 21 losses. Really, really rough season for them. There's no doubt about it. There's not too much more you can say. There wasn't a whole heap of positivity, but we will see what we can find as we go through some of the numbers and players' performances from this season. Moving on to their match-by-match analysis, there it is. As you can see, a lot of red. A lot more red than they would have hoped to have seen this year. They obviously have a bit of an excuse. They had a lot of injuries. We'll get through them shortly, but they're not the only team to suffer injuries this year. But they showed some good signs. They showed some bad signs. Early on, up until it was pretty much after the St Kilda game where they started to get their injuries in round 4. They then went over to the West, lost to West Coast, and then after the bye they just kept dropping like flies. Had that really, really bad run through like rounds 8, 9, 10, especially rounds 9 and 10 where they lost by 91 and then 119. They then bought it back. They started getting some players back. They showed some good signs against Essendon, Geelong. They went over to Adelaide, beat Adelaide over there at Adelaide Oval, which was a really good win. And then really struggled for consistency and, I guess, performance in the second half of the year. Couple okay performances. The game against Collingwood was solid. Against GWS was okay. North Melbourne, they took to the line. I reckon if that was at the MCG, they may have been able to get that win. And then finished off a little bit average, but kind of what you expect. Surprisingly, they ended up being one of the only, I think, 6 teams total. Beat the minor premiers in Sydney. They were the first team to do it at the MCG in a really, really weird game. They got over the line by 5 points at that point, and then halfway through the second quarter against St Kilda, they looked like they were on track for back-to-back wins when they were 5 goals up. They threw that one away in the second half, but if they had got that win and all of a sudden a 2-3 start, I mean, who knows what would have happened. They also took Carlton right to the line in round 1. Potentially, maybe, could have won that, should have won that. Looking back at it, Carlton were really average that day, and Richmond nearly got over the line, but in the end, pretty average season from Richmond. Could have been a little bit better, but in the end, sitting 18th on the ladder, 1 game behind anyone else. So we'll look at their last 3 years. Obviously, this year, 21. Bit of a drop-off after last year being 10 and 12. 2022, they were 13 and 8, so they've kind of been dropping. Dropped 3 games from 22 to 23, and then 8.5 games they've dropped since over last year to this year. So that's a really big drop off, as you can see across the board. Points for has steadily dropped. Points against has risen quite dramatically as well. They've gone 7th on the ladder, 13th now to 18th. As you can see, though, a lot of that's to do with the amount of players they had to use this year. They, as we've mentioned, and we will mention it again, they had a lot of injuries. 42 players used. Their average age was a lot lower than last year, a year younger per average. and also a bit less experience in, what's that, like 25 games less experience on average. So certainly a younger, less experienced team they ran this year. In the end, though, it's only an excuse, and they finished bottom of the ladder. There's not much else to say there. Having a look at the stats comparison, I know this has a lot of information. I tried to do it as neat as possible. Is it the best? I don't know. But so obviously, first up, we've got their 2024 numbers for and against 2023 and 2022, mainly focusing on 2024, and we'll have a little look at how that changes from year to year. As we mentioned, points for and against have gone in the exact opposite direction of what you want. So 2022, the numbers were actually pretty good, with a plus 17.5 points per game. That's gone all the way to minus 37.4. So a real big drop off there. The accuracy, 2022 to 23 dropped, and then this year it stayed about the same. Disposals dropped off as would expected, not a high number there. Other important numbers, inside 50s, they're just struggling to get the ball forward. They're struggling to get the ball out of their defensive 50. The turnover games got worse. Contested football has really dropped, but also their opposition contested football has also dropped, so it's not as bad as it perhaps looks at first sight. Uncontested footy is staying roughly level in terms of their winning it, but their opposition's certainly getting a lot more of it than what they were in 2022. Hardball gets stayed pretty much the same across the board. Loose ball gets isn't too bad of a number either for them. Centre clearances has dropped off a little bit, as stoppage clearances really has. Their forward efficiency this year took a massive dive. Last year they held on to it, their forward efficiency. They weren't getting the ball as forward as often as 2022, but this year the forward efficiency just completely dropped off the radar, as did their defensive efficiency, which suggests that, as you'd kind of expect, that they're young, inexperienced. I guess when we get to their players wrap up in a minute, we'll discuss what happened at the bookends. But yeah, their forward and defensive efficiency really dropped off. Their pressure wasn't too bad. Technically it's the same as 2022, but it probably should be better when you consider the fact that their opposition are having an extra 16 touches per game than what they did in 2022. So you'd want to see at least an increase of 10 or so in the pressure acts. Instead, they're dead level with their 2022 numbers. So that maybe needs some work as well. Hit-outs and hit-outs to advantage stays about the same, which isn't that surprising because Toby Nankervis is still their ruckman and he had a good year. He wasn't outstanding, but he had a good year. Another interesting thing that I kind of skimmed over is the metres gained. That shows you just where they're at, I guess. Minus 582 metres per game, which is huge. That's more than 3 lengths of the football field per game. When in 2022 they were plus 256. So it's a huge discrepancy right there. We'll now have a look at their scoring sources this year. For the last 3 years, I guess. This is total points from each scoring source. The top 3 are the 3 scoring sources, and then the bottom 3 are the areas of the ground, I guess, where they've come from. Kick-ins, not too bad this year, in all honesty. 4 points per game from kick-ins is pretty good. However, conceding 7 points per game from a kick-in is not great. From stoppages, they really dropped off this year. Basically 2 goals worse off than last year. Meanwhile, defensively from stoppages, not too bad. Those numbers are okay. Turnovers, they dropped off huge there. They've gone from 10 goals a game, basically, in 2022 down to 6.5. So a big drop off there, and also the defensively from turnovers has pretty much gone the exact opposite direction from 7 goals a game up to 10 now. Where they've got it from, they do okay with forward, but I mean it's still dropped off quite a bit. It has across the board. Defensively, across the board, they're conceding more, especially from their forward 50, from their opposition's forward 50. So from their defensive 50 turnovers, and the opposition winning the ball in their defensive 50, in Richmond's defensive 50. I think that's actually meant to be forward half now that I think about it, but anyway, that doesn't matter. Forward half, the opposition really score well from those, which isn't that surprising when you win the ball in your forward line. You typically are going to score more, but as you'd expect, their numbers dropped off, so across the board, they're just a lot worse. It'll be interesting when we look at some of the other teams, these numbers. For Richmond, it's not that interesting because obviously they've just dropped off completely across the board. We'll now jump into some players. These are the injured players and other reasons as well. But these are all the key players, I think key players that missed at least 5 games this year. Josh Kipkis, he's obviously not the biggest name player there, but he missed 21 games, so he missed a lot. Tom Lynch missed 19. There's queries about him, his injuries and whatnot, but 19 games from someone who potentially, even now, should, you'd imagine, be a 35 plus goal kicker for the year. Also is just a target, which they're really struggling for once we get into their best players by position. You'll see what I mean. They just don't have key forwards. They even had to roll Noah Bolter up there quite a lot this year. Dylan Grimes, he missed 18 games. Jack Ross, 16. Maurice Rowley, 14. I know LeFou is a young key forward. I think he's 26, but he was showing good signs, but he missed 13. Couple due to form early on, but then did his knee, missed the rest of the season. Hopper, he missed 11. Prestia, 10. Marlon Pickett, 10. Dusty Martin, 10. Obviously, a few of them were due to retirement. Jack Graham, 9. Tim Torino missed 8 during that really bad patch of their season, and Liam Baker also missed 5. So quite a lot of games on that list. It'll be interesting once we get to some of the other teams to see what the comparison is, I guess. But you can see, especially at the top, there's quite a few key position players, a couple key defenders, couple key forwards, and then down towards the middle and bottom is a lot of the smaller players, midfielders, medium-sized forwards, and pretty much all midfield forwards other than those couple key defenders up the top. Their general defenders were the one thing that kind of stayed intact, but they weren't able to use that to their advantage due to injuries elsewhere on the field. Now we got the interesting part. We have a look at some of the players. These are the highest rated players according to the AFL official ratings by position. By probably the next couple months, we're going to have my official ratings is going to be complete. I'm still working on the system and updating it across the board, but hopefully that will be up and running soon enough, and I'll be able to compare a little bit. It might not be better, might be worse, who knows, but at least with my ratings that I think works, instead of using these official AFL ratings, which can be good but can also be bad at times. So first, key defenders. Ben Miller was a big improver, as you can see. He went from 7.5 to a rating of just over 10, which is a really good effort from him. Noah Bolter, he played a bit forward this year, obviously also went back at times. His rating dropped a little bit. As you can see, no key forwards had a decent rating and played enough games this year. I pretty much, for Richmond, I won't be doing this low for every team, but this is pretty much every player that had a average rating of over, I think, 5, maybe 6. So it's not good rating at all for the Tigers that they don't have anyone above 6 in their key forward line. Medium defenders, is probably their strongest position, let's be honest. Daniel Rioli, he improved. He went from 10.3 to 11.6. Floston slightly dropped, but was still pretty solid. Jaden Short dropped massively, which is probably a bad sign for him and Richmond this year. Nathan Broad also dropped quite a lot. Their medium forwards, Ryan Mansell was probably their biggest improver across the board this season. He went from 4.7 up to 8.9. Dusty obviously dropped quite a bit, but he was injured in and out of the team and in the end retired. Obviously a fantastic career, played his 300th game this year, but yeah, his season wasn't great. Their mid/forwards, so these are players that play through the midfield but also play up forward. Liam Baker, he improved slightly. He went from 10.2 to 11.7. Next is Sho Bolton, who was their best player last year. He's slightly dropped, quite a bit actually, 4 points per game basically. Is not perfect, not great. So maybe a little bit more output from him would be handy. Maybe a little bit more midfield time would help that. Jack Graham went from 9.2 down to 8.9, so not much of a change there. They're pretty much full-time midfield crew that played quite a few games. It's not great reading. Tim Taranto was exactly the same, just his normal output, 11.4. Prestia, also the exact same. He basically was the same. And then the other two, Jack Ross and Jacob Hopper, both dropped by more than 1 point, which isn't ideal. And then their ruckman, Nankervis, did what Nankervis does, rating of about 13. In the end, was their highest rated player, according to the AFL ratings this season. He was their third best last year, so kind of has dropped a little bit there. But, I mean, the rest have dropped. He's obviously risen up to top. I think, looking at everything, Nankervis was their best player this year. Only missed a couple games. Excuse me. Across the year, Nankervis was their best. He missed, I think, the first game, maybe another game reasonably early in the year. Bless me, where those sneezes come from. But overall, everyone across the board has kind of dropped off. We'll maybe put together some more stats and post them on my socials across the coming weeks of different players and such for the Tigers, but it's not great reading for them. I think Nankervis wins their best and fairest. I'm not 100% sure on across each team, the different voting systems, because every team does it differently, but I would be surprised if he didn't win it, because nobody else really showed great signs. Bolton had some good games. Rioli had some good games. Floston started the season really well, but across the board, I think the Tigers kind of didn't show much. Nankervis was probably the only one that showed consistency across the year. Yeah, that's the Tigers. What's that mean going forward? I don't have any more slides to show, but we'll just have a little chat, I guess, about Richmond and where they are at, and where they're going in the future. Not great signs. It's going to be an interesting off-season for them. Obviously, they've had a few retirees, Dusty Martin, the main one, but not their only one. Pickett's retired, as has Dylan Grimes. So there's 3 players gone. Chuck in the fact that there's a few of their key players looking at leaving. So it's going to be interesting to see what they get for them if they do indeed leave, which, I mean, we kind of expect they will. They're all players in that probably peak age range, around the 26 to 28 mark, maybe 25 to 28 mark. So losing these players could be a big issue for the Tigers, and it's going to be interesting to see what they're able to replace them with. If they're draft picks, they could be in for a few lean years. I don't know if Richmond's really a destination club at the moment. They're going to probably have to show some signs of rebuilding before anyone really wants to go to them. But you look at what some teams have done over the recent years, like Hawthorn this year have completely bounced out of nowhere. I still don't think they have the most talented list. I don't think anybody would say they do, but they're playing great football, great team football. The vibes are high. They're enjoying what they're doing, and it shows on the scoreboard. They're not the first team to do it, especially over recent years. GWS did it late last year. Carlton kind of did it late last year as well. Collingwood did it the year before, where they just kind of go from low on the ladder and just get into some form, get some confidence up, and maybe that's what Richmond need to try and do. I can't see them doing it next year, but if they can get a couple good puzzle pieces into their lineup, obviously you'd expect that they're going to have quite a big war chest coming up if they are losing all these players. Chuck in the fact that Dusty Martin's retired. There's the potential that in coming years they're going to have a massive war chest, that all of a sudden maybe they will be able to get some good players in that right age range, and some of these younger players that they've got a lot of games into this year especially will be coming on and potentially getting to a point where they might be able to take over the mantle a little bit. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's going to be a tough rebuild for them. In all honesty, it's not to say it can't happen in 2 to 3 years, but it also could be a really rough 3 years for them. We'll see what plays out over the next month or two with trade period and draft season. So it's going to be, they're probably going to be the busiest team, not entirely by choice, but I would imagine that they are going to be very busy over the trade period and then again throughout the draft week. So they've got their work cut out for them. If they want to do anything other than bottom 3 next year, they're going to have to do some real work, and I think it's going to be important that they find a way to enjoy their football, because as we've seen and I mentioned before, teams that are enjoying themselves out there play a lot better. It's not rocket science. It's the same with any workplace. So that's the Richmond Tigers. Just a little review of their season. As I said at the start of this episode, there's going to be every team, all 18 are going to be done over the next 5 weeks or so. Most of them are going to be coming out in the next 2 weeks. Every team that's been eliminated so far. So the bottom 10 teams will all be done, hopefully roughly around the time that finals football starts. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. How long will the Richmond rebuild take? Let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to also subscribe. There's plenty of videos coming out. Even teams that maybe you don't go for might be some good viewing. I think this is probably one of the least interesting ones, just due to the fact that the numbers were so bad for so far across the board. I think some of the other teams, there'll be a lot more interesting information put out there. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to come back. Is basically the long and the short of it. I'll be back. There'll probably be North Melbourne video going out tomorrow. And then we'll have an all-Australian video going out on Thursday this week. If you've already been past that, then when you're watching this, go back and watch it. There'll be my full all-Australian team plus a second all-Australian team, like a backup team, as well, released on that video. Don't forget to check out the social medias. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch us on the next one.